up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Elena, and today we are taking the chapters part of Chapters of Elena quite literally because we are talking about books. I wanted to share 13 books that I found really helpful, not just for personal growth, life, and development in general, but ones that I feel are particularly useful for those in their 20s. As I wrap up this decade of my life, I have been reflecting a lot on what messages and ideas and information I found the most helpful and most important and necessary during such formative years of my life. Your 20s are, maybe not for all, but for most of us, a time of exploration, of figuring out who you are, what you want, and also potentially laying some of that foundational groundwork for your future. So I wanted to share the books that helped me with these things the most. I divided up the books into a few key categories, those being career, money, productivity, spiritual and personal growth, and then at the end I also include books that I think are specifically helpful for women. Obviously there's a lot of other topics and categories of books that would be helpful to read in your 20s, but these are just kind of the main categories that I've been reading from, and I can only speak to what I've read. So let's get into it. First up is Books for Your Career, U-Turn by Ashley Stahl. I've mentioned this book on my channel before because it's a great one. It's all about creating a career based on who you are, which I think is so important and so overlooked a lot of the time, even though it's kind of a simple idea. This book has a great blend of both mindset shifts, but also some really practical, actionable advice that you can take action on and bring into your life. There are a bunch of exercises to help guide you in the right direction and find things like your core values, your core skill set, how to address resume gaps and career pivots. The author is a career coach and she incorporates her own story of her career journey as well. She actually used to be a counterterrorism professional, so it's quite interesting to hear her background. So if you are confused about the direction of your career, I think you could find this book quite helpful. Next up, we've got Range by David Epstein. I love this book so much. I'm actually reading it a second time right now. The first time I listened to it on audiobook, but there were so many good parts of it that I actually went out and bought it and started to, do my little sticky notes and everything. This book basically debunks the entire myth around having to specialize and do just one thing. It talks about career and work, but also about succeeding in sports and in musical endeavors. And what I love most about this book and why I think it had such a big impact on me is that it's not just kind of like fluffy, feel-good reinforcement of saying it's okay to be a generalist, it's okay to have a lot of interests, it's okay to be multi-passionate, which is all true. If you are a person who is like this, like me, really multi-passionate, into a lot of things, wants to do a lot of things, and doesn't want to narrow down, it's important to believe in those statements. But this book really changed the game for me because it gives a lot of research and studies and very concrete research-based examples that back up these statements. So you're not just trying to take someone's word for it or trying to make yourself feel better about the kind of person that you are, but there is actual research that shows how generalists actually are incredibly valuable, incredibly useful, and have so much to offer in a world where we feel like we are constantly being pressured to niche down, to specialize, to choose one thing, to have the thing. And this book just like really made me feel better about not being that kind of person and showed me what strengths I truly have. Next up, let's talk about books for money. My first recommendation is The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I don't have the physical book because I listened to this as an audiobook, which I would recommend. It's kind of fun to hear it in his voice. He reads his own audiobook and I feel like it just adds to the experience. I've read a few other financial books as well, but what I really liked this one for was its very simple, straightforward, practical advice. He walks you through a very clear, very easy to follow, very logical roadmap for financial stability, financial wealth, and I just found it so much less overwhelming. Sometimes I think books in the finance space can feel really overwhelming and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to save, but I also want to start investing, but also I need to make more money and ask for a raise and this and that, and it's a lot to feel like you need to get organized, but he breaks it down step by step, and I found that so reassuring and just really gave me a clear place of where to start with my finances and how to get them organized in a really simplified way. Now, for a more mindset-based approach to finances, A Happy Pocket Full of Money by David Cameron Gikandi. This is a fantastic book, but I will say it does require an open mind, just in the sense that it takes a very spiritual approach to money, which if you are kind of a spiritual person, you're into law of attraction, quantum physics, rewiring your money mindset, etc., then you're gonna love it already. If you're not, I would encourage you though to read it with an open mind and really soak in the words that are on the pages. You're not gonna find a lot of super like practical details in this, but that's not what it's for. It's here to really change the way you think. The book is kind of repetitive, repetitive, but I also think that's like part of the reason it actually works so well and had such an impact on me. By kind of repeating certain ideas and even exact phrases and words over and over again, it really instills this new belief in you in a very natural way. And by the end of the book, you just feel like you have completely upgraded your mindset. And I will say this book has actually changed the way I see the world overall beyond just the money part. Next up, let's talk about books for productivity. I have read a lot in this category. And I think when we say productivity, we use it as like this catch-all phrase, but I think some of the main like subtopics within productivity are 1, time management, 2, attention management or focus, and habits, which there are so many books about that, and we'll talk about that when we get there. First up, for the time management piece, I actually have 2 recommendations just because these 2 books are actually quite similar in the sense that they kind of have the same underlying philosophy. Books are The One Thing by Gary Keller and Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Even the covers look the same. They're like black, white, and red. Now, what I love about these 2 books specifically is that they both take a very minimalist approach to productivity. You can kind of tell by the titles. The One Thing, it's all about finding the one most important thing for you to focus on and learning to let go of the rest. And even for Essentialism, like the subtitle is The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. So again, it's not about squeezing as much as you can into every day, but how to actually know what are the right things to get done and focus on just getting those things done. I think that concept of minimalist productivity in general is just so underrated and so important because you can have all the time management tips, tricks, techniques, hacks in the world, but at the end of the day, if you have too much to do, you just have too much to do. And the best way to instantly give your productivity a boost is to minimize, simplify, and cut a bunch of unnecessary stuff out. So I'd say just look up both these books, see which one kind of connects with you the most, and read that one. Now, when it comes to attention management and focus, which is much less talked about than time management, I feel, but equally as important, I would suggest Deep Work by Cal Newport. Developing the ability to focus and then maintain our attention on certain things is so underrated. This book, obviously, I have a lot of tabs in it as well, has a great combination of mindset shifts and thinking about your time, your attention, your focus, your energy differently, but it also shares studies and research and different facts about focus and attention, which I love. I love when there's some scientific background, and it actually has some practical advice for applying this to your life and being more focused at work. One of my favorite parts of this is actually where he talks about doing a social media detox, but not in the way that I have ever seen anyone else approach it. It's not the like, don't go on social media for a week and then reflect and see how you feel. It's not that. It's a very unique, interesting way to approach it. I think it'll just change the way you think of social media use overall. So it's very interesting. I would highly recommend it. And when it comes to habits, it probably comes as no surprise, Atomic Habits by James Clear. This book has blown up. Even if you don't normally read personal development, you have probably seen this cover or this book lying around somewhere or someone talking about it. And if you are wondering if it is worth the hype, 100% yes. I've read quite a few books about habits, and I would say that if you read this one alone, you could probably gather a solid 80 to 90% of the information that's out there in all the other habit books. And I find that it is structured in a super easy to remember, practical, and easy to apply way. Everything in it just like makes so much sense, and when you apply it to your life, like it really, really works. I actually have another video I made a while ago all about habit books specifically, so if you want to see what some of the other habit books are that I've read and which ones I recommend most, then I will link that video up here somewhere for you to check out. When it comes to books for spiritual and personal growth, there are so many out there, so many that I have not yet read, so there's probably plenty of other good ones. But one of my personal top recommendations is Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. As the title suggests, the book is about learning to accept yourself. I would say even love yourself. And I think it would be a particularly good book if you consider yourself somewhat of a perfectionist. It talks a lot about cultivating compassion for yourself, touches on themes of forgiveness and fear and feeling unworthy. The subtitle of the book is Embracing Your Life with the Heart of a Buddha, so it does pull a lot from Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist teachings, and it includes many guided reflections and meditations as well. It's a really beautiful, comforting book. For me, it really helped me find a lot of self-acceptance, of course, but also just this inner peace and the ability to go with the flow a little more and to navigate those ups and downs of life with a bit more grace. The next book is The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. I feel like we often hear this idea of you are not your thoughts, you are not your mind, but there's a difference between kind of continuously hearing something something, especially out on social media, to the point where it almost feels like cliche versus actually really understanding that message at the core of your being, like on a soul level. And I feel like that's exactly what this book does. It's not a long book, it's under 200 pages, so an easy read. And I think it could definitely help you develop a more positive relationship with yourself. It also really helps you learn how to be more present and connected to your truth and your essence. It's probably the spirituality book that impacted me the most, and one that I definitely think I'm going to be reaching for to reread. Next up is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I don't have this book because I borrowed it from the library, and it's actually the only fiction book on this list, purely just because I didn't read fiction for a lot of my 20s. It's only really the last couple of years that I have finally picked it back up and got back into it. So I didn't read this book until last year, but I wish I had read it so much earlier. It is a great book, especially if you have some fear surrounding making life choices, big life choices, if you're worried that you're going to regret things or make the wrong choice, or maybe you already have some regrets in your past that you are struggling to kind of shake off and move on from. I personally found it quite comforting, and it's also just interesting to read from a story perspective, but also has so many great little nuggets of wisdom. Okay, next up, let's talk about books that are specifically great for women in their 20s. First up, we've got In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. This is a must-read, I would say, for anyone who has a period, who bleeds every month. This book really made me question why the heck we don't learn more about this in school. There is so much important information in here about our bodies, our cycles, how we operate, how we change throughout the weeks and throughout our cycle. It talks a lot about cycle syncing, so how to optimize what you eat, when you work out, when you socialize, when you are most productive, all of these kinds of things that we kind of expect to be the same day to day because, you know, the world is primarily built around men. But we are not the same day to day. And once we learn that and we acknowledge that and we know when we are in our best space for certain things, then we can actually use that as an advantage as opposed to the disadvantage a lot of us have come to think of our cycle as. The book can get quite sciencey, talking about like hormones and details like that, but even if you just skip over the more sciencey bits, I still highly recommend giving this book a go and sticking with it, because the information and the perspective that you're going to have after reading it is just so worth it. I think it's like a required reading. And then the second book for women that I would recommend is more so on the spirituality side, and that is Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. This is a book that contains, I think, about 20 different myths, stories, fairy tales from different parts of the world, different cultures, and she basically retells these stories and then also analyzes them and kind of excavates them and talks about the themes and topics and takeaways, and all through the lens of kind of exploring this wild woman archetype. She adds in a lot of her own commentary, her own take on it, and I thought it was just incredibly interesting. But also for me, when I read it, I felt like a lot of the stories are about a woman kind of coming into her own, making that transition from girlhood to womanhood, which we don't really talk about that much actually in society, about learning to stand up for herself and her needs and her desires. I'd say it's a very empowering kind of book in the sense that it will really help you also step into your innate power and wisdom as a woman. I feel like it's the kind of book that changes when you read it over and over again. Every time you read it, you'd like take something new away from it, especially as you grow and have more life experience through womanhood. So I think this is a book I'm going to be coming back to and rereading quite a few times. Now, obviously, I can only recommend what I've actually read, and there are so many great books out there. I have so many more on my to-read list, so I would love to hear from you. If you have read any of the books on this list, what did you think? And do you have any other book recommendations that you think are particularly helpful for people in their 20s? Share it in the comments below. I would love to hear, and I'm sure other people watching this video would also love to hear it as well. And if you are looking for another book recommendation video, I would recommend checking out this one. I share 7 books for self-awareness and self-discovery, so make sure you check that out next. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you again next week. Bye.